So we now have the set model poured in stone of the upper alginate impression. We notice that we have included the hamular notch area and the tuberosity. We have all of the teeth with no bubbles, no flaws. There's a small flaw here that can be easily corrected with a number 7 spatula, and we'll show you what that is. The vestibule is clearly captured in the impression and reflected now in the stone model. And we have sufficient excess that we can trim the model to have a nice strong model for lab purposes. You'll also notice that the base of the model is not flat, which would be preferred, so that will require some trimming now to make it so that the base is parallel or in the same plane as the occlusal table. On the lower model, you'll see now that we've also captured the retromolar pad area here and here. We have a good reflection or impression of the vestibule to its depth and good sound tooth structure with no bubbles or flaws. We also have recorded Wharton's duct here sublingually and the lingual fossa on both sides. You may also notice, however, that there's a plethora of stone surrounding this model, so we have much more than we need. The result of that is it will take more time in trimming. That's about how much you really need. The model was placed on the countertop, and so we have a nice flat surface that corresponds with the occlusal plane of the teeth. So we'll now proceed with the trimming procedure. There are certain planes that can be used in trimming so that it minimizes the amount of measurements that have to be taken. One plane is from the distal buccal cusp of the mandibular second molar to the cusp tip of the cuspid, and that would form a plane upon which you could parallel the trimming blade as you're trimming away the excess model stone. Another plane would be from the cuspid to the central embrasure. Then again the same on the other side, central embrasure to cuspid, and cuspid to distal buccal cusp of the second molar. Another plane is distal to the retromolar pad on both sides, so that you have the standard outline of a trimmed model that was shown earlier in the models that we have. Now trimming the upper model in an effort to get the base in the same plane as the occlusal plane. I'm trying to maintain a vertical position with the occlusal plane to the plane of the model grinder table, so that we can create that flattened base that we desire. We'd like the base of the model to be a minimum of 5 millimeters thick between the palate and the base. Usually 5 to 10 millimeters is desired there. And again, in trimming the model, there's water going on the wheel to keep it from clogging with stone. And you also just use a light but firm pressure on the model, and I gently move it from side to side, thinking that it may improve the efficiency of the blade. I don't know if that's true or just placebo. So once we get the base trimmed to where it's fairly flat, I'm now going to use that as my standard for placing the rest of the cuts in the trimming process. So again, I'm going to follow the hamular notch area, just distal on both sides, and I'm going to make those 2 points a line that's parallel to the trimming blade. And you can see that the stone is just being carefully trimmed away. We may go just a little bit further on the patient's right side than on the left until we get it somewhat symmetrical. The next plane, as I mentioned, is from the distal buccal cusp of the second molar to the cuspid, forming a straight line that I will make parallel to the blade of the trimmer. I'm going to stop at that point because we want the depth of this vestibule here to be approximately 1 millimeter, and yet we want to have this area to be trimmed to where it's about 1 to 2 millimeters thick. I've actually over trimmed this slightly in this area. Now we're going to do the other plane, going to the midline to custard. Again, trying to preserve enough of the vestibule so that we will get the 1 millimeter depth and the land area. As you're doing this cut, always watch the incisal edges of the anterior teeth so that you're not trimming them. You do not want the teeth to be caught in the trimmer. So my general rule is to not go any closer than 2 to 3 millimeters. We follow the same plane on the other side now. Custard to central embrasure or midline. Watching the lateral incisor so that it doesn't get too close. And now we'll do second molar to custard. Again, because of the extent of the buccal bone in this area, we're only going to trim to this point because we still want to have a 1 millimeter depth and a land area. Two other planes that I didn't discuss that are used in orthodontic trimming is a plane between the cusp tip of the cuspid and the second molar, and that will be perpendicular to the blade of the trimmer and will give us the posterior trim position. We'll do that on each side of the arch. And then as a final, you set it on and just gently roll the model across the blade, giving it a nice rounded, mountable shape. Again, watch your anterior teeth if they don't get into the blade. Continuing around. So now all of the sharp angles have been replaced with a nicely rounded model. The rest of these areas will be trimmed on the lathe or with the green-handled knife, but it allows us to see a clear indication of the depth of the vestibule, the buccal bone, and the buccal surfaces of the teeth. With the lower model, we already have the flat surface, so now we just need to work on getting the planes. And in this case, we're going to start with the narrowest area so we can trim it. And I estimate this will take about 10 minutes. It's important not to push hard on this blade because they have been known to break. The lathe is a very powerful instrument and needs to be used with caution and respect. If that blade is powerful enough to cut stone, you can imagine what it would do to your fingers if you got them caught in there. So caution must be used. Always use a two-hand technique when grinding and working. Try to rest your fingers on the base of the trimmer so that you have good control of the positioning of the model. Also, when you're done, make sure that sufficient water runs through the trimmer so that it doesn't clog with debris. Now turn the water off, and then be sure to turn off the trimmer. Remember, it's important for you to protect yourself with all of our dental instrumentation. As part of the model trimming process, debris from the model trimmer has now accumulated on the surface of the model. So it should be carefully washed under tap water. You can use a soft brush. I usually use a regular toothbrush to do this. But you just want to get all of that debris off so that the model is nice and clean. The stone itself is resistant enough to manage this kind of scrubbing without causing it to wear. Gently shake the model. Be careful not to drop it. Another option you can use is to blow it with compressed air. Let's go over and demonstrate that. This is our compressed air gun as part of the instrumentation that we have here in the lab. It can be activated by turning the nozzle in line with the metal or the tubing, and then it is very powerful. So grip the model firmly and then just blow the air to dispel any moisture and also any debris that may still be on the model. Again, it's important to hold the model firmly so that it doesn't get blown out of your hands and fracture the teeth. Then when you're done, just turn it off or leave it on if the rest of the lab students are using it.